John McMullen. He joins us now on 97.3 ESPN. And, John, some really interesting news coming from the NovaCare complex today. It appears the Eagles must have watched that game film again and saw 73 consistently getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, they did. All of a sudden, after getting a vote of confidence on one day, Chance Warmack has taken first-team reps in practice. So it's pretty evident. Chance wouldn't admit it. They obviously talked to him, but other players did, that he took the first-team reps at left guard. So he's going to be the starter this weekend against the New York Giants, and that's a really quick hook of Isaac Seumalo.
Is that definitive? Is that definitive, you think, or is it just apparent from – yeah?
It's definitive. Like I said, Chance wouldn't admit it himself, but other players did. So there's no way you're giving him first-team reps on Wednesday, which is the most important day of the week when preparing for Sunday, if that's not the plan. You don't just do that as let's take a look at this guy. It's pretty evident they're trying to get him ready to start. Now, things can happen. He could pull a hamstring. He could sprain an ankle, and that could change. But as of right now, he's scheduled to be the starter. I don't think there's any question about that. And the interesting thing to me is, remember, he hasn't dressed the first 2 weeks.
Well, that was we talked about that earlier in the show, John. That was like Vitae. He was inactive last year, and then when Johnson went out, he went from inactive to starting right tackle.
Yeah. But what that tells me is you have to think, obviously Wisniewski is going to stay as the interior backup. So if they're intent on using Vitae as the swing tackle, which he was taking those reps again today, that means Isaac Seumalo is going to go from starter to probably not dressing.
Yeah, I guess, right. They're not going to keep – I mean, they've been sitting one lineman, so they're not going to just keep a guy up, right? So one of these guys one of the guys who's either been active or starting is going to be sitting if, in fact, Warmack, as you're saying, is going to be the starter.
Exactly. So, obviously, it's not going to be Wiz. It could be. I mean, they could say, remember, Seumalo started at right tackle against Baltimore. They could say he's a better option than Vitae because Vitae has not performed well when he had to come in for Jason Peters. So, I could see that. But, as I said, if that's the plan, they weren't using Seumalo outside of tackle. So right now, I would say unless the Eagles dress an extra offensive lineman, he's going to go from starter to inactive in 1 week.
Is this the right move? I mean, is this something, though, that we've got to look at and say they did the right thing, even though he's a young player and you don't want to lose his confidence? Was this the right thing to do?
Well, from purely a efficiency standpoint, it's the right thing to do because he was that bad in Kansas City. The Eagles gave up 6 sacks. He gave up 4 of them. So if you talk about that game, the rest of the offensive line was actually pretty darn good in a really tough environment. So from that standpoint, you say yes, but I think what the average fan doesn't realize is these guys aren't robots, and this has an effect on him mentally down the line, and you're still thinking about him as a future starter, whether it's guard, at center, and if you lose a guy mentally, you might lose him, and you might not get him back. So these are the kind of things you have to weigh, and we constantly talk about the theme of bad offensive line play around this league, and I wrote about it at FanRag Sports today. It's not just the Eagles. It's not just Isaac Seumalo. It's all around the league, and if you see other young players struggling, you're going to see it with the New York Giants. Eric Flowers was every bit as bad as Isaac Seumalo on Monday Night Football. The Giants are sticking with him. Now, partially because he's a top 10 pick, partially because they don't have anything else. But a lot of times you stick with a young player who's having growing pains.
What's Warmack bring? I mean, we know he was a starter, top 10 pick, Alabama, reunited with his offensive line coach. So the story's a nice one. He struggled in Tennessee. He did not live up to the top 10 billing. But that was a right guard. He's now at left guard. Do we feel like this guy can get back to that form of being a top 10 pick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that happening. I really don't, because his reputation was so high coming out of Alabama. A lot of people thought he was the best player in that draft. That's how highly regarded he was. But guards don't tend to go that high. That's sort of the domain of tackle. So that kind of explains to be a top 10 pick as a guard that means you're really, really good. You look at Zach Martin, who's probably the best guard in football in Dallas. I think he was 18, somewhere in that range. It just doesn't happen a lot for offensive guards. So that tells you his base skill set is really good, but it just never clicked for him in Tennessee. He seems slow off the ball. He's a better run blocker than a pass blocker, which should help this unit that struggled so much running the football. But we'll see. The Eagles' best left guard is in Denver right now. And their second left guard, as Gary Cobb told me today, was probably Dallas Thomas, who's cut out of the league.
You're the second guy who said that today.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that. I think their second best left guard is Stefan Wisniewski, but they don't want to start him for whatever reason. And he's limited, but you know what you're going to get from Wisniewski. He's not going to dominate, but he's also not going to be dominated like Isaac Seumalo was in Kansas City. He's just solid with his technique. He's not going to embarrass you, and he would be similar to what Alan Barber provided. But the Eagles chose their path, and it hasn't worked out to this point.
Would you say, John, that the Eagles watched the film and surmised that he was just not ready and that he was getting beat so bad that they had to make a change? I mean, was this the reason they make this change, is that they watched that film and said, wow, this is worse than we thought?
Yeah, I mean, it
like
unsalvageable.
Unsalvageable.
Well, I don't know if it's unsalvageable, but clearly it was bad because Doug Pederson said on Monday, we don't want to push the panic button. Now, he left a sort of a back door, and he said we're going to continue to evaluate. So he wasn't, putting his fist down and saying, I'm going to stick with him as the starter, but he did say he didn't want to push the panic button. Well, today the Eagles pushed the panic button. And the reason they did so was because he was so bad against the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's mainly, again, hardly the first young offensive lineman in this league. He's got terrible technique, and it's showing on a weekly basis.
John Deshaun, so now that the change has been made to Warmack, can Pederson finally commit to running the football? I mean, we've seen Warmack in Tennessee's system.
That's an old wives' tale.
Well, thanks for being.
But there are two things I always point out. The Eagles need a better run-pass ratio. There's no doubt about that, just to save Carson Wentz's life. But there's a little context you have to add to. The first thing is I constantly say to the people in Philadelphia, because this is such a tired refrain, this is not 1975. This league has changed. You don't run the ball 60% of the time. That's not what this league is. If you're doing it, you're probably going to lose, and that's if you're doing it with good running backs. The Eagles don't have good running backs. So they're going to be a pass-heavy team, but it's got to be better than it was in Kansas City. Otherwise, you're going to be seeing Nick Foles at some point. We're going to all find out if his elbow is healthy.
So, again, Sproles was one of the lead backs as far as the rotation last week. Was that a game plan going in for Doug, or is it, as he said, he was keeping the hot hand?
No, that was the game plan coming in, because you saw by the disparity in playing time. I mean, Darren was out there the majority of the time. He got the majority of the touches. They saw something in Kansas City that thought probably they didn't feel comfortable running the ball in the middle. They wanted to get it on the edges, and Darren's obviously more effective at that. And he's the guy Doug Pederson is most comfortable with. And that's also not surprising because he's the one guy who can run the football, catch the football, and pass protect. The other guys have their issues, whether it's LeGarrette or Wendell Smallwood, certainly Corey Clement. They're not as, Darren Sproles is one of the Eagles' most reliable players. And that's why everyone was sort of on the floor when he fumbled, because he just doesn't do things like that. But that was a perfect form tackle. And the Eagles, basically, when they want a running back on the field and Doug and Deuce start to look at things, they say, well, Darren's our best running back.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen. The secondary banged up. No Corey Graham at practice today. You got no Watkins. You've got no Darby. You've got no McLeod, right? So who's left? What are some of the options? And how do they stack up with this Giants team with Brandon Marshall, Shepard, Beckham, Ingram? They added a new tight end that adds a little to the offense. Their offense has struggled, but they got some names.
Yeah, I mean, they have talent at the receiving group, obviously, and the young rookie tight end is also very talented. But as I always pointed out before the season, you got to get those guys the football. You got to have a mechanism to get the football. And they can't block anybody. And when they do block somebody, the quarterback can't get those guys the ball. And when he does get them the ball, Brandon Marshall drops the ball. So if I'm the Eagles, yeah, you have a ton of issues on the back end. 50% of your starting secondary is out. Rodney McLeod's not going to play this week. Obviously, Ronald Darby's already gone. People forget Corey Graham didn't practice today. He also was dealing with the hamstring issue last week, and he was able to go. So I think ultimately that's the plan. He's going to go next to Malcolm Jenkins. Then you have Chris Maragos as the backup. Camus Grugier-Hill played safety in college, so he could do it in an emergency. But, yeah, they're struggling. They tried to add a practice squad safety from the Bears, but the Bears stopped that by elevating him. So they need another body. But at this stage, just talk to Malcolm Jenkins about this very thing in the locker room. If you add somebody today, they're not going to be ready to play anyway by Sunday. So it's got to be those guys. You got to hope Corey's able to go. I think he will be. And then you just can't have more injuries. Is what that comes down to.
By the way, the Giants are saying Evan Ingram is in the concussion protocol, precautionary there, but just to throw some news out there real fast on the Giants side of things, since we just mentioned him, but the Eagles secondary all sorts of banged up, but a bright spot with the injuries, John. Douglas, right? I mean, the fact that so many guys got hurt, they had to stick him on the field, and he might make them keep him on the field. How many times do we see that where there's a guy who's not a practice player, but he shows up in the games?
Yeah, he played very well.
He was the highest graded Eagle, right? Pro Football Focus, highest graded Eagle was Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, and, it didn't look good for him, obviously, early in the season, and that tells you maybe you're right. Maybe he's not a practice player.
He's Tim Tebow, baby.
Yeah, and he shows up and he's forced into action. And believe me, I don't think the Eagles wanted to play him, but they had to, and he played well. So now you're in a situation. Now, Jim Schwartz played a lot of zone coverage, not a lot of press coverage to protect him, obviously, but that's not strange with Tyreek Hill on the other side. I think you'll see a similar plan with Odell Beckham. What helps is he's not 100%. There's no way Odell's going to be 100% by Sunday. So you're getting a more limited guy. But, yeah, you got to give him a lot of credit. And the best part was he kept everything in front of him. He tackled well. He handled his job as well as you could expect for any rookie in his first game. So that was a big positive coming out of Kansas City.
John, me and Mike talked about it earlier, the importance of this game. Yes, it is only week 3, but you have a chance to put the Giants in an 0-3 hole, 0-3 in the NFC and 0-2 in the NFC East. Are the Eagles recognizing how big of an opportunity this is?
Yeah, they do. I mean, when they gathered before practice in the big team huddle, you could hear Brandon Graham saying, "This is Giants week." I mean, they're pumped up for a division game. Not only a division game, it's their home opener. Remember, we feel like we're so deep into the season. They've been on the road for 2 weeks. So for the first time, they get to play in front of their own fans. So everyone's excited about that. And the realization is I think they believe they can compete in the NFC East before the season. But I think they now know, after seeing Dallas, after seeing the Giants, and after beating Washington, I think they now know they can compete for this division title. And they want to stick the foot on the throat of the Giants, which is a bad football team right now. There is just absolutely no way the Philadelphia Eagles should lose this game on Sunday.
John, if the Eagles win this game and go up 2-0 in the NFC East, is this bigger than when it was last year and they were 3-0? 2-1, 2-0 in the NFC East.
Well, I think it's bigger because they're better. They're a better team. They're better equipped to get through the season and keep things moving in a positive direction. I think in a lot of ways, last season the quick start was an anomaly after the late trade of Sam Bradford. I think Carson Wentz surprised a lot of people. He's more prepared, and he's the improved player we were hoping for at obviously the game's most important position. So, yeah, I mean, if they go 2-0 in the division, I think it's far more meaningful than last season's start, and partially for the reason that the two playoff teams, as I just mentioned, from last year, the Cowboys and Giants, part of it is that they've come back to the pack. So that's part of it as well.
Right.
You're not going to be dealing with a 13-win Cowboys team.
And the schedule's tougher for everybody. We know that playing that AFC West, very competitive. That makes the thing, makes the storylines a lot different. The Giants lose 0-3 in the conference, by the way, as well. John, when you walked around the locker room today, did you see any more, I would say pearly whites, but Jernigan's got gold. But did you see a lot of bright smiles from the defensive linemen?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon talked about it, and you could see, I mean, I asked him, how do you stop from being overconfident in this game? Because I think that's the biggest issue the Eagles front has, because it's a mismatch on paper. It is. And it's not your run-of-the-mill NFL mismatch. It's just glaring to the point where you look at what the Giants have on their offensive line and you say, how do they block these guys? And the answer is probably they don't. So you're going to see a lot of quick passes, and that will bring into the thing that Rasul Douglas, we just talked about, did so well. You're going to have to tackle well in the defensive backfield. If they go with a 3-yard, quick hitch or something of that nature, you got to tackle them right there. You can't let them get past the sticks and beat people in space. This Giants offense is not equipped to do much, and you've seen that through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and they're going to stick. The Eagles are making a change at left guard, but they're going to stick with Flowers at left tackle. That seems to be a spot where the Eagles are really going to be thrilled. And I'm writing a piece for the website, doing a little research. Cox with a sack, Jernigan with a sack and a half. They've got 9 sacks in 2 games. They're on pace for 64 sacks this year. The last time they had 50 sacks was 2012. You got to go all the way back to 2001. The last time before that, they had 50 sacks in a season. So their defensive line has gotten off to a great start. So are they for real? And I guess if they are, we'll find out this week, because they should whip. They should win this battle and whip the Giants' offensive line.
Yeah, and they are going to win the battle. It's just a matter of, how do you define winning? I mean, the Giants and Eli Manning specifically are smart enough to understand they're going to get whipped up front. So they're going to shift their game plan, as I said, to a lot of quick throws to getting the ball out of his hand as quickly as possible. So you might not see the big sack numbers, but that's not necessarily as important as getting him sped up even further, making him throw the ball before he wants to, even in that quick environment, and getting him off the spots. If you do that, you're probably going to create turnovers, and things will start to snowball. But, yeah, I mean, this front is for real. The only question is, is it top 5 or top 1 or top 2?
Okay.
They just have a ton of talent up front.
And I want to get your quick thoughts. I like Hicks. Bradham's very solid. Kendricks is playing well. Pressure in the quarterback, pass defense, all around the field. He looks like he's kind of shifted gears a little bit. He used to play at one speed before. Everything was full. He never really knew how to change gears. It seemed that he was almost too athletic for his own good on the field sometimes. Now it seems like the game is slowing down for him. I'm impressed with what I've seen from Kendrick, and it seems that they're trying to get him on the field more.
Yeah, I mean, but you can't, unfortunately. I mean, this league, and Jim Schwartz always talks about, defenses, remember, they can't dictate. They have to respond to what the offense does. The offense is in control. As long as people spread the field and put 3 and 4 receivers on the field, sometimes you got 5 guys going in routes, as Doug Pederson said today. You can't put 3 linebackers on the field. You just can't. So a lot of his lack of playing time is the fact that he's a third linebacker in the league that plays 11 personnel most of the time, and he's not the only one. If you look around the league, the third linebacker doesn't play a lot. Will he get an opportunity if somebody gets hurt? Of course, and he has looked improved, and that would make the Eagles more comfortable, but he's just not going to play it all that much, unfortunately. And the one disappointment I will say so far in the Eagles' defense has probably been Jordan Hicks and run support. So that's one thing you have to keep an eye on, because I've always thought he's a natural weak side linebacker. He's playing in the middle. He's moved to the middle. But we always talk about adjustments in this league and the fact that opposing coaches are always going to make adjustments for good players. I think he's seeing some of that. And now he's got to realize it and make his own adjustments in return, because it's been a struggle for him in run support.
By the way, Chris Jones of the Chiefs, Defensive Player of the Week. That's how you get benched.
Yeah, he might get Defensive Player of the Year off that one game.
John,
he was unbelievable.
At JF McMullen, read his piece on offensive line play in the NFL, and it was backed up today by a statement from one Bill Belichick. Check that out at JF McMullen, FanRag Sports NFL, and the all-new 97.3 ESPN.com, where John is struggling to figure out how to post stories on there. I didn't even know the website changed. They changed it on me today, but I'm not. We'll look for the story, man.
All right, thanks, guys.